we had heard from the president that we could perhaps see a trade deal by August. When are your members thinking that a deal could come?
Well, you know, a trade negotiation like this typically takes many, many months, if not years. There are a lot of issues that ought to be discussed in any new bilateral agreement between the U.S. and Japan on trade. So I think this is going to take a little bit more time, and expectations of a deal as early as August are probably pretty optimistic. There are several key issues that need to be discussed clearly. There needs to be an understanding of what's going to happen on agriculture, and the U.S. is very concerned about Japan's huge surplus in the auto industry area. We're very concerned about the increasing problem that our pharmaceutical companies have with Japanese plans to reduce the prices in Japan that are paid for pharmaceuticals here. That's going to really cut in to U.S. exports to Japan. That needs to be addressed. And then this agreement really ought to be looking to the future, to digital trade, where U.S. companies have been very successful in the Japanese market. That needs to be clearly included in any sort of comprehensive deal. So I think this is going to take a little bit of time to negotiate.
Mr. Ambassador, what do your members need to see in this agreement for you to be able to call it a win as compared to the Trans-Pacific Partnership that the Trump administration pulled out of 2 years ago?
Right. Well, the TPP would have provided a lot of access across the region. We're focused, of course, now importantly on Japan, and the ACCJ is very supportive of having this new bilateral agreement brought into force. But it does need to address some of these key issues that I've just discussed: agriculture, autos, auto trade, pharmaceuticals, and then finally, it needs to be future-oriented. And what I mean by that is, in the digital area, pretty much everybody's business model is being transformed. And in this area, the U.S. has particularly strong companies, great technologies, and is very competitive. And so if this agreement is future-oriented, as well as being a win-win agreement that the Japanese see is going to work for them as well, then I think we can expect to see U.S. exports to Japan and the U.S. business presence in Japan further expand. We're already doing actually pretty well in Japan as U.S. businesses, but we could do better. And that's what really hoping this new agreement is going to accomplish by bringing in a comprehensive deal.
In terms of the future, and in a different sense to what you're describing, are you concerned that auto tariffs are going to be back on the agenda once the upper house elections are out of the way in Japan?
The president indicated, as you're suggesting here, that he was going to lay off the pressure on Japan until after those elections. And they are indeed very important, I think, for Prime Minister Abe. He has a two-thirds majority in the upper house, and he certainly wants to keep that. And depending on the outcome, his ability to get a trade deal, including some of the difficult areas in agriculture, through the diet eventually is going to be affected. So it's going to be important, I think, to see what the Prime Minister's margin for maneuver is after those elections. But clearly, it's going to be a key thing to be watching here as we gauge the prospects for quick resolution or quick agreement, rather, in these negotiations.
Christopher, I just want to pause for a moment to get our viewers across some breaking news on the Bloomberg right now. We've got core machine orders for Japan for the month of April coming in at a huge beat. We have been expecting a contraction of 0.8%. We got an expansion of 5.2%, so a really blowout number there. Gives us a year-on-year figure of a 2.5% expansion, a reversing the contraction of 5.3% we had seen. Also, just a word on PPI, that coming in as expected. Slight contraction for May, down 0.1%, on-year steady at 0.7%. Christopher, back to you now. Some impressive numbers there. Just speaking to Japan particularly, is it becoming harder to argue against the imposition of this controversial sales tax towards the end of the year?
Well, that would be my view. I think there's a tremendous amount of momentum behind moving forward with this increase from 8% to 10% in the consumption tax, the VAT tax here in Japan. And so I certainly expect these numbers to encourage or to build rather on that momentum as we move into the fall here. So at this point, I think it's a pretty good bet that Japan will move forward with this, and that will be a important further step in the efforts by Japan to improve its fiscal position, which, as you know, is in terms of what the straight numbers look like, one of the most serious among the OECD countries.
Right. Christopher, just quickly, as the numbers right now show, investment really in Japan doesn't seem to be slowing down. What are your members thinking about expanding business in Japan when you have so much uncertainty over trade?
Well, Japan represents an extremely important market for many of the largest and most high employment American companies, and also the companies that have tremendous growth potential, further growth potential in the future. So the fact that Japan's economy continues to grow and expand is a very important indicator for U.S. business about where they should be paying their attention going forward. The U.S.-Japan relationship has never been stronger. The alliance has been further strengthened under Prime Minister Abe. And so absolutely for U.S. business is a very encouraging sign.